أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا صدق الله العظيم. اللهم افتح لنا أبواب الخير واختم لنا بالخير واجعل كل أمورنا بالخير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بازخوار سپاس از استاد سید نور سهیم. در این قسمت از برنامه از همکاران تکنیکی خواهش میکنم که سرود ملی کشور را پخش بکنم و از حاضرین عزیز خواهش دارم که با استاد شد. بازخوار سپاس از تیم تخریب. حال هم از آقای عبدالرحیم سیدی رئیس اجرایی آهنگر دنیا خواهشمند هستم که روی استش تشریف آورده و برنامه امروزی را آغاز شود.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. هیئت رهبری آهنگر محترم دنیا و اعضای خواببرده‌ها، مؤثرین بسیار عزیز و گرانقدر، distinguished guests, Associate Professor Treni from Washington University, Dr. Ali Zafar from the Ankara Yildirim Bayazid University, Associate Professor under Associate Assistant Professor from Law School of University of Leicester from UK, Dr. Sarkar Mahastra from National Law University from India, Dr. Siddiqui Lecturer from Dunya University, and distinguished faculty members. On behalf of the Dunya University of Afghanistan, I would like to welcome you all to this very important and timely online symposium on refugee and internally displaced persons in general, and Afghanistan context in particular. One of the major global issues of the 21st century is the issue of migration, refugee, and internally displaced persons. People from many countries, including Afghanistan, due to various reasons, political, economical, or having different opinions, have been forced to leave or migrate to other countries. Unfortunately, Afghanistan, with 6 million refugees and IDPs, stand amongst the top and large exporters of refugee and IDPs at the globe. More people are migrated than ever before, posing challenges and opportunities for individual countries and the entire world. Now, more than 250 million people are living outside countries of their birth. Most of them are economic migrants who leave their countries seeking better jobs and better life and economic opportunities abroad. They are also fleeing persecution. Often there is a link between the refugees and economic migrants, but the distinction between the two has major consequences. In 1951, an international convention has legally defined the refugee as a person who, owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself of the protection of the country. It gives them a specific right and protection, including access to healthcare and education. But this definition does not account for every refugee and IDPs. Many people increasingly displaced by natural disaster and climate change, and despite the international convention, typically every individual countries decide whether to recognize migrants as a refugee and grant them legal protection. Most countries focus on who entered their countries, such as economics, values, and security issues. And many countries have taken serious military measures at their borders and considers migrations as a potential threat to their national interests. Some countries reject migrations on different reasons, arguing that migrations are a burden for government services as they take jobs from their natives, while some other countries welcome migrations and see them as an opportunity, such as bringing new ideas, culture, skills, and economic values. For instance, over 40% of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or children of immigrants, while the home countries may lose talented individuals as well. But who is responsible to take care of refugee, asylum seekers, and IDPs at the international level? UNHCR, a branch of UN, is the major international organization to lead the support for refugee and asylum seekers with governments, but has very limited resources as it is provided on volunteer basis. So therefore, still migrations and refugees and IDPs or internally displaced persons facing lots of challenges in their home countries or in the host countries, which require national, regional, and global efforts and resources to respond to them in a professional and systematic manner. I hope today in our discussion to have a very constructive and fruitful discussions which can help and to respond to the challenges faced by refugees and IDPs at the national and international level. I thank you for your attention. I hope that you will be having a enjoyable and fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks much from Mr. Abdulrahim Saidi, Chancellor of Dunya University. In this step of program, I would like to request Dr. Hidayat Sarifi to come to the stage and lead the remaining program.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Distinguished guests and faculty, staff, teachers, professors, and leaders, you're most welcome to one of the important events that we have here in University of Dunya in Kabul concerning refugees and IDPs in the country. And we also welcome our participants internationally from India, from UK, from Turkey, and from United States of America. And we also have some guests, classes attending this important event from Republic of Kazakhstan. One of our colleagues who is leading his class online in Kazakhstan has requested us a link for joining this program from Kazakhstan. We also welcome those who are attending this program from Kazakhstan. Now, as it has been mentioned by the CEO of the university, this is a very important topic, particularly being Afghanistan, the second largest producer of refugees in the country worldwide, and also one of the largest in the region in terms of having IDPs. Over 4 million people we have, and it is gradually increasing every other day. Sometimes, particularly due to COVID-19, that we had a huge number of returnees from Iran particularly, and from other neighboring countries such as Pakistan. So IDP, particularly refugee, is one of the, not only in Afghanistan, one of the leading issue internationally that most of the countries around the world has their policies and foreign policies and domestic policies are focused on migration and refugee issues. So having said that, I would like to tell to our participants from different countries, from universities, that we were expected to have some distinguished guests from different ministries. Due to the security reason here in Kabul, we couldn't have them, unfortunately, and they had to cancel their attendance in this important event in the last moment. Because we had this heinous attack, and using this opportunity, we would like to convey our sincere condolences to those who have been victim of this heinous attack in the University of Kabul the other day. And we have over 30 people victims. We had those students who were studying in the Faculty of Public Policy have lost their lives against this terrorist attack. So giving that, I would like to give a kind of small orientation about the program that we have. Our 4 main presenters, key presenters from different countries. From India, Professor Shubhru will provide us an Indian perspective of refugees issues. From Ankara Yildirim Bayezid University, Assistant Professor Dr. Ali Zafer Sauroglu will discuss about refugee issues in Turkey from the perspective of Syrians. As you know, Turkey is the leading country in terms of host countries, home to approximately 5 million Syrian refugees in the country. And then we'll have Dr. Önder Bakırcıoğlu, Associate Professor from University of Leicester, UK. He will be talking from the perspective of international law and refugee issues and security. And then the first presenter in this program will be in about 5 minutes of time. We'll have Dr. Trani. Professor Trani will talk about impact of COVID on IDPs, a case study from Afghanistan. This was a project that we conducted together with Professor Trani. So this is a joint project between Dunya University and Washington University that we conducted in 3 provinces of Afghanistan, from Herat, Nangarhar, and Kabul. We reached out about 800 IDPs in the country. It's about more than 250 IDPs in each province. We had around 60 questions asking from different socio-political perspectives and education perspectives. Our questions were regarding their challenges they faced due to COVID-19 in terms of gaining education, in terms of having, earning their daily lives, in terms of receiving hospital services. So Dr. Trani will give this presentation on behalf of both universities. So he was our partner in this project that we completed it in more than 3 months. We still are working in terms of analyzing the accommodated data, and he will be shortly discussing about this in detail. Before taking too much of time, and I don't know if Professor Trani is with us online. Can we confirm that if he is online with the technical team? If Professor Trani is online, he will lead the presentation of the keynote speakers today. And then in each of these presentations will be for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, we will go to another lecturer or presenter. He will discuss about his own topic for another 15 minutes. And then we will have all these 4 presentations from different universities across the globe. And then we will have a question and answer session. Then you can ask any questions that is raised or you have from our participants. Then we will conclude after that this important event today. He's not okay. I would like to then ask if any of our next participant, if he is available to give the presentation. Maybe Dr. Zafar Ali Sarolo or Associate Professor Önder Bakırcıoğlu, if he's online, if he can proceed with the presentation. I don't know if they're online or not.
Ali Zafar.
Okay. Dr. Zafar Ali, are you ready to give us the presentation?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, so we lead with Dr. Ali Zafar Sarolo from Turkey, Ankara Yıldırım University. And let's have him and we'll listen his presentation. And
how can I share my
presenter?
Can I share my screen now? If they let me to share my screen, please. Sorry, could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. You can start your presentation.
Let me to share my screen. I think
Sir, we can hear you. You can start your presentation.
You can share your screen, Dr. Ali Zafar Sarolo. We haven't yet. We are not able to see your screen yet.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm trying, but I couldn't open my screen now.
Okay. There must be a button you see in the Zoom. You should be able to.
Yes, I saw it. I noticed it, but it says that host disabled attend screen sharing.
Technical team, could you please let Professor?
Can I send my presentation to you?
Sir, please, you request for your screen sharing, we allow you.
Yes, I asked to give permission. Still showing host disabled attend screen sharing, it says. Dr. Siddiq, I sent you to your WhatsApp my presentation. I don't know. Yes, now no, you allows me to record the attend.
Okay.
I couldn't open it.
Give us a few minutes, Dr. Sarolo. We are working hard to make this, to remove this technical issue.
Now searching.
No, I couldn't still. Unfortunately, I couldn't open. I couldn't open.
Sir, you can start your presentation. We will fix and you can share after that.
Can I send it from here?
Yes, you can send it to me. I will share here.
Okay. I will send you to chat. Just a second, please.
Now search it. You can share your screen.
Yes, now I achieved to open it. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to begin my presentation by thanking to the all organizers and especially Dr. Sıddıkoğlu for the kindful invitation. Today I'm planning to talk about the schooling refugee children, especially Syrian students in Turkey in general. I would like to finish my presentation in 15 minutes. Please inform me if I exceeded my time. So before going to the education agenda, I would like to talk about overview on Syrians in Turkey. Turkey is the largest refugee hosting countries now in the world, and there is 3.6 million Syrians under the temporary protection. It's a kind of international protection statute. And also nearly 19,000 residence permit holders from Syria available in Turkey. And among these population, 110,000 Syrians acquired Turkish citizenship in the last 3 years, especially. On the other hand, nearly 400,000 Syrians returned to their hometown since 2011. And there is also a question mark about how many Syrians had already passed to the Europe, to Turkey. The dispersion of the Syrians in Turkey is quite different. Mainly in the border part of the Turkey, Syrians are living, and Istanbul is the champion about the hosting Syrian refugees with the nearly 500,000. Gaziantep, Hatay, and Şanlıurfa, these four cities are hosting almost half of all Syrian population in Turkey. As I said, the percentage also is quite different. As you see, Kilis, the nearest city to Syrian border, almost 76% of the population in the cities are Syrians. Interestingly, maybe this is a unique episode in the world. Also, Şanlıurfa, 20%, Gaziantep, 21%, and Hatay, 26%. All of the city population are Syrians. Syrians were living in the camps especially beginning with the events. However, today, in accordance with the policy of the Turkish government, the settler in the camps is quite little. Just 1.6 percentage of all Syrians are living in the camps now. The rest of all, nearly 98 percentage, are living in the urban areas with the Turkish societies now. When we look at the age and gender distribution, it's quite interesting. Male as the percentage, there are many different reasons for explaining this situation. However, it's kind of a data just I would like to show you. And also nearly 500,000 children are under 4 years old. And according to statistics of scholars, over 600,000 new children were born since 2011 in Turkey. So the population is quite various, and 70% of all population are women and children. And also the age average, as you see, is quite young comparing to the Turkish society. Until now, the other part of the world, we couldn't say that they share the burden of Turkish society too much. Since 2014, just nearly 43,000 Syrians have been resettled into the third countries in the various of the world. In here, Germany is the leading country. Then Canada, France, and Netherlands are following them, but the numbers is quite small. Yes, how is the situation about the education in Turkey? When we look at to the age population, it is a dramatic increasing about the school age population among the Syrians. As I said, just 600,000 newborn children are available. And in 2014, for example, nearly half of the population were school-age children. It's come to here that over 1,082,000 school-age population are available, and this makes the 30% of all population Syrians in Turkey. It is quite. I would like to underline that million of school-age refugee children is quite considerably huge number to tackle with for a government. I mean, on the other hand, in contrast to the school-age population increasing, the Turkish government achieved to enrollment of the school-age children. In 2014, just the 30% of all school-age children were enrolled to the schools. In 2019 and 20, it reached to the 63% of all school-age children. It is, I think, quite significant achievement or increasing about the schooling of the children. So when we look at to the average of the global statistics, it shows that 50% around. We can say that the achievement of the Turkish government with the 63 percentage, it is quite above from the global average. According to the stage, it makes a difference. First of all, 30% of just the preschool school age children were enrolled now. However, in the primary school, 88 of nearly all school age, primary school age children were enrolled to the schools in Turkey. And in the secondary school, the percentage reached to the just 70. In the high school, it dramatically decreasing to the 32%, as you see. So we can say that, especially in the primary school, it is quite high in the enrollment of the all Syrian refugee students in Turkey. When we look at to the gender distribution, it is quite near, and here, although still there is a difference, but the female enrollment is almost the same with the male student enrollment. So we can say that it is quite important that the female students, refugee students, were also enrolled to the schools. In the higher education, in the university, numbers shows that today almost 27,000 Syrian under the temporary protection were enrolled to the Turkish university. I mean, nearly 30,000 students now are continue to the education in the Turkish universities now. In comparing to the 154,000 all international students, this number seems to quite high also, we can say. What is the bottleneck, the challenges about the education agenda in Turkey? First of all, the high dropout of the students in the schools is the main bottleneck. Mainly, the male students are leaving from the schools, especially in the secondary, but mainly in the high schools, because of the compulsory working to support their family's economy. So the child labor, mainly for the male, is the main reason about the high dropout of the students. When we look at the female, the early marriage percentage is quite high. There is no statistic. I couldn't give you a statistic about that. But the poor conditions maybe force many female Syrian refugee children even to make a marriage in the early age. So in the schools, the main barrier is about the language. Since the Syrians' mother tongue is Arabic, it's quite different with the Turkish language. It requires to be learned a new language. I mean, in Lebanon or in Jordan, maybe there is no such a disadvantage for the Syrian refugee children, students. However, with the as a country of different language speaker, Turkey is quite disadvantaged for the Syrian students in Turkey. So, although the government stepping many precaution about that. However, the huge number is not in the satisfactory level. Discrimination, segregation, and self-segregation even in the schools are obvious. And according to our one of the latest field study research, this peer bullying is much more seen comparing to the native students. On the other hand, the actors in the field, principals, teachers, and parents also unaware about the importance of the education. So many different actors in the education field are not so much eager, or they do not make what they can do a satisfactory level. For example, principals do not want to accept in some schools, although the legislation ordering them to accept all students to their schools, they are making some different tactics and strategies to direct them to another school instead of to taking their own schools, because the capacity of the schools had already overed with the natives, and in such a situation, in the refugee intensive regions, the schools do not want to accept refugee students as well. Teachers do not so much eager to teach the refugee children. I mean, many reasons are available. There is no enough programs, curriculum, or materials which is established for the education of the refugee children. On the other hand, the teachers must working out their routine studying. So this makes also a disturbance about the refugee children on the teachers. Parents also do not give the enough care. They do not going to school enough. They do not going to the teachers to talk about the situation of their children, etc. There are also many reasons about the parents as well. However, these are the general bottleneck and challenges in the education agenda in Turkey. On the other hand, as a migration scholar, I believe that these huge numbers of refugees, migrants, forced migrants in Turkey will also including a potential challenge, potential to improve the human capital and development of the Turkey. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Zafar Sarlo, for a very insightful presentation talking about issues of Syrian refugees. As all of us we know, particularly being Afghans, I think there's no family in Afghanistan who doesn't have its close relatives having tasted the hardship of displacement and being refugees. All of us, I'm sure, sitting here in this hall and throughout the country, we do have some members of our family as a refugee or displaced people in and outside the country. So when we talk about displacement, when we talk about refugee, it's not a matter of migration only. It's a matter of economy, it's a matter of culture. Particularly, it's a matter of culture. When you are displaced, protracted displaced, you're living in a country for a very long time. You get culture where particularly Dr. Zafar Sarlo talked about a huge number of newborn Syrian children in Turkey. So imagine those children raised up in Turkish society will be Turkified in terms of their cultures. Would they be adopted back to their country is one of the biggest questions that we have. As Afghans, I think we are facing the same thing. We have over 1 million refugees in Pakistan, and they're not returning back because there is a war or there's a peace in Pakistan. Most of them are not returning because they're more than Pakistanis themselves in terms of their culture. So there is a huge challenges when we talk about reintegration of the refugees. And also this is the same case happens in internally displaced people within the country. Imagine a country living diverse, having different people, different culture in the north and south and east and west. Displacement even there matters in terms of culture. Now I would like to ask Professor Önder Bakırcıoğlu to give his presentation on armed conflict and internal displacement, shifting the discourse and the use of force. If you're ready, Dr. Ali, Dr. Önder Bakırcıoğlu, the floor is yours to give your presentation. We cannot hear you. Can you hear us? We're facing again a technical issue. Sorry.
Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Sir, please unmute your mic.
Yes, you can unmute yourself, Professor Onderbak. You click on your mic on your screen on the left. Bottom left, you have a drawing of a microphone. Okay, so apparently the host doesn't allow the Professor Onderbak to unmute.
Sorry, we started already. It was you were supposed to present in the first. You were our first presenter. Since we couldn't have you, we didn't have you online. Then we started with Dr. Ali Zaferoğlu from Turkey. He has just finished his presentation. I hope you listened to his presentation. So now, okay, if you are ready,
Yes, I did.
yeah, okay. Professor Treni, would you like to start then? We have you here, we can see you. If you can
Okay.
start, we will request Dr. Önder Bakırcıoğlu to come after you. So the floor is yours, Professor Treni. Professor Treni from Washington University, and let me introduce once again. We had the joint project here in Afghanistan on IDPs. We covered 3 provinces. We reached out about 800 IDPs in the country from 3 main host cities in Afghanistan, from Herat, Kabul, and Nangarhar. So, Professor Treni, the floor is yours. Please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Professor Siddiqui. Good morning, good afternoon, sorry, everyone. Salam alaikum. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here today. My apologies for being late. I hope everyone is having an interesting international symposium on refugees and internally displaced persons. Very important topic, looking at a population that has been under considered and often forgotten in international policies. So I'm going to indeed discuss a common study with Dr. Siddiqui and Mr. Hamid and myself about the situation of internally displaced people in Afghanistan and the impact of the current pandemic on their livelihoods and their situation in general. So the outline of the presentation, I will remind everyone a short background about vulnerability, and particularly vulnerability of internally displaced persons. I will summarize the objectives of the study, our methods. We are still in the process of managing the data, and a couple of concluding remarks. So in terms of background, I think we need to have a bit of historical views of the current situation. We are in an economic system that gives priority to economic growth, but many of us have been raising the point that it's not enough to alleviate poverty. The trickle-down effect to the most vulnerable, to the poor, has hardly occurred since the 1990s and the globalization of economy. It has been benefiting overwhelmingly the most affluent, and the idea of a global development based on human dignity and human rights, as people like Professor Hulhak has theorized back in the 1990s, has been largely sidelined. There is a need to recenter on the essential needs and the essential services for the most vulnerable, as well as enhancing what we could call the equality of opportunities and for the most vulnerable, and empower those left out of globalization. And so I would like to center the talk around this idea that internally displaced persons are actually part of those we call vulnerables. And by that, I want to adopt Professor Dubois' definition of this idea that vulnerability is actually the likelihood to see one's well-being worsen when facing a shock. And when I talk about shocks, we are talking about natural disasters, but also financial crises, armed conflicts, long-term socio-economic and environmental changes. And in many ways, the current pandemic is part of those environmental changes that our common world has been facing, because most of the credible assumptions about the cause and the origin of the pandemic is looking into how the global warming, the expansion of human habitat in areas where animals, and particularly non-domestic animals, have been living, create this contact between those animals and domestic animals, and eventually human beings. And the pandemic, the coronavirus, has been able to be transferred from those wild species to our domestic animals and ourselves. So this is an enormous shock for everyone in the population, but it is even more a shock with hard consequences for vulnerable people. And so how to define vulnerability? By this idea that they are more at risk of shocks, that their well-being is threatened by all kinds of shocks. And in many ways, what we see today is the erosion of any kind of human development achievements that has been observed and realized with a lot of efforts in the last decades. And so by having those shocks translating into reduced human development, we also see, as a vicious effect of those shocks on the livelihoods of the already vulnerable, less ability for all people, but particularly the most vulnerable, to be able to cope with the shocks, while at the same time, the assistance that they may receive in the past is also reduced by the overall economic crisis that we observe, particularly in the case of the pandemic. And so already before the pandemic, we were observing that 15% of the world population was living in poverty. 80% was lacking social protection. 1.5 billion, or 1/5 of humanity was affected by conflict. And we just talked about Syrian refugees in Turkey. Turkey has been, as my colleague demonstrated, one of the main impacted countries by refugees in the last 10 years. 100 million displaced by conflict and violence. And what we observe with the current pandemic is even more vulnerability to hunger, unemployment, and disease without enough health coverage. So who are those vulnerables and who are those most at risk of the current pandemic? We are talking about the poor, people with less than $1.25 or even $2 per day, according to the World Bank. Women, particularly women alone with children, migrants, indigenous groups, minority, ethnic and religious groups. Older people, we always forget them, and they are a growing group, part of the world population. Rural populations, and of course, refugees and internally displaced persons, who are the one we are discussing today. And finally, persons with disabilities. And of course, some people do combine those different identities. And so they are poor, they are internally displaced, and they can be older people, or they can be from a minority, or they can be women alone with children, or having disabilities, increasing their vulnerability. And so what do they have, those vulnerable people, is this unfortunate common characteristic of facing additional barriers to overcome any kind of adverse situations or shocks, as I defined earlier. And so if we focus now on internally displaced persons, what do we observe is that at the end of 2019, before the spread of the pandemic, we had already 45.7 million people internally displaced due to armed conflicts, generalized violence, or human rights violation, according to the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center. That's twice more than the number of refugees in the world, 26 million. And this has been a huge shift in the last decade, from refugees escaping their countries to people changing location due to those reasons within the borders of their own country. In 2020, sorry for this mistake, we have another 117,000 new displacements linked to various disasters in Afghanistan, for a total of 1.198 million in Afghanistan. Out of those, on top of those, 461,000 are new displacements due to conflict and violence. It's in 2019, for a total of 2,993,000 in Afghanistan. So about 9% of the world internally displaced persons, or 4,191,000, are in Afghanistan. And so why so many IDPs in Afghanistan even before the pandemic? Well, the first reason is, as we are discussing today, is conflict, fighting and attacks involving the Taliban, the government forces, ISIS, and other non-state armed groups in 32 out of 34 provinces, but also what we call natural disasters, but unfortunately with the global warming, largely man-made disasters, such as flooding in the western provinces of Badghis, Farha, Ghor, Helmand, Herat, and Kandahar. And so in 2020 to date, so at the, let's say at the mid-year, we count an increase of 117,000 more internally displaced persons. And so just because of the current situation of the pandemic, we thought that it was really important to start surveying as much as possible internally displaced persons. Mostly because if you look at the discourse around IDPs, internally displaced person today, it's absolutely difficult to organize any kind of data collection to understand their situations. So in many ways, our understanding of how the pandemic is affecting internally displaced person is limited. And that's particularly a difficult situation because we don't have knowledge while we are in a situation of increased vulnerability for those people, and not knowing their situation creates new barriers to any kind of response or durable solutions to alleviate the impact of the pandemic on their livelihoods. And so we tried to understand by this study in the recent month what is the effect of the lockdowns in Afghanistan on IDPs' coping strategies when we know that traditionally they depend on the informal economy and daily work to get by. And so this means that we had two general or specific aims. One was to generate some evidence and knowledge about coping strategies of internally displaced persons, starting with 3 provinces, Kabul, Herat, and Nangarhar, to understand perception of COVID and response to COVID-19. And at the same time, we wanted to try to understand what was the effect of the current pandemic and the lockdown on their livelihoods. So we had 3 research questions. The first one was how has the pandemic disrupted the livelihoods of the conflict-induced internally displaced persons in terms of economic life, social life, their health, and their education? What are the knowledge, attitude, and behaviors of internally displaced persons with regards to the pandemic? And finally, what are the implications for their life, and what coping mechanisms are they able to mobilize to face the pandemic? We used mixed methods, and first of all, what I'm going to talk about, present initial results. Once again, this is very recent work we finished only a few weeks ago, which is about a quantitative survey with about 750 internally displaced persons in those 3 provinces. But there is also a qualitative component conducted with key officials who are actually involved in the efforts to fight the pandemic and support internally displaced persons. So the quantitative survey was phone interviews because it was in the midst of the high of the first wave of the pandemic in Afghanistan. We prepared 8 modules in our questionnaires, demographic characteristics of the members of the household, the displacement history, the knowledge, attitude, and practice against the disease, the health of the internally displaced persons, their education, and their economic and social activities. So I will present a few results based on what data, clean data we already have. And the first graph is actually showing what is, how long have people been displaced in those three provinces. And as you can see, some of them have just been displaced. Almost 250 out of the 750 have been displaced in the last few months, and double of that have been displaced in the last year. So most of the people have been actually displaced by fighting in 2019 and 2020. So almost 2/3 of them. When we ask about knowledge of the pandemic, and we ask, of course, several questions, but again, in the limited time we have today, which is 15 minutes, I will only present a few aspects of our questions. And one of them was to ask, how serious do you think the disease is for your family? And you can see back 2 months ago that the idea that it's a very serious disease and it puts at risk the health of the family was shared by most of our respondents, because about 60%, 600% out of 750 responded that it was a very serious health problem, threat. We also asked several questions about what were your attitude towards the pandemic. And one simple question was, how do you feel about the risk of the disease? And as you can see that, again, out of 750 people, 500 were showing were responding that they were very fearful of the pandemic. We also asked about the beliefs about the pandemic. And one question we asked, because of course everything was tested locally, and one of the rumors was that infidels were engineered the disease to use against Muslim population. And as you can see again in the graph, more than 500 people considered that this interpretation of the disease was absolutely untrue, and about 150 consider that they didn't know, right? Maybe it was true, or maybe it wasn't true, but majoritarily, more than 2/3 of the person interviews believed that that was an absolutely untrue affirmation. And so then we ask, what do you do to avoid the contamination by the disease? And we ask, of course, about masks. We ask about cleaning hands. And here I just present the idea of respecting social or physical distancing, we should actually say. And you can see that more than half of our sample always respected social distancing, or about 1/3 added that often, as much as possible, they were doing so. We also look into their health, and among many questions, we investigate if people were particularly sick in our group and in our sample, and we ask about chronic illnesses. And you can see here that a small proportion of our sample is actually suffering from a chronic illness such as diabetes, cancer, effect of stroke, for instance, etc. We ask about depression because, as you know, being displaced is a huge has a huge consequences on your mental health and particularly on anxiety, distress, and depression. So we ask a very simple 10 questions common scale about depression, and you can see with the form of a curve, the bell form of a curve here, that the level of depression. So the score was between about 0 and 40. You can see that the level of depression is pretty high for the population. We have quite a large number of people who have more than 20, who score more than 20 on the depression score, which is the threshold to show some quite important sign of depression. Finally, as I said, we look into livelihoods and education. So in terms of education, you can see that this is a very vulnerable population. A large majority is totally illiterate, was not able to go to school. Very few were able to go to primary, middle, or high school, and almost no one was able to go to higher education. In terms of livelihood, we wanted to check if this idea of having a very unstable employment was reality, and in fact, what we the IDMC is showing for the internally displaced persons of the world, that they really largely depend on daily labor, and the informal sector is confirmed here by this bar that shows that almost half of them are working as daily laborers, and quite a large group, more than 25% are, close to 30% are unemployed today at the time of the interview. So briefly, I would like to say that the findings, the preliminary findings that I have been showing you, confirm the theories I presented at the beginning, that internally displaced persons are a particularly vulnerable groups, are particularly deprived, and as a result are directly threatened by the current pandemic situation. That is an extra layer of threat to their livelihoods that has been already largely threatened by the ongoing violence in the country. And this has terrible consequences for the level of deprivation they face and their vulnerability. Of course, what would be interesting to do, if we could secure the funding for that, would be to re-interview and to keep interviewing our sample across the coming months and years to see how their situation actually continue to worsen because of economic downturn linked to the pandemic situation, especially if we face a second wave, as the public health experts are afraid we will face during this winter, or on the opposite, if any kind of intervention of humanitarian aid, public policies in Afghanistan are put in place and are able to alleviate the terrible consequences of both violence and the pandemic. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions.
For giving us a very informative presentation. This is the project that we are working together, and this is, as Professor said, that this is a preliminary results of our research, and we are delving in depth in assessing all these data that we have collected, and we are jointly preparing or working to publish academic paper in some renowned journal with Professor Treni and Shapur and myself, and we're working on that. Thank you very much, Professor. Now we would like to request Dr. Önder Bakırcıoğlu from University of Leicester, UK, if he is there to talk about his presentation on armed conflict and internal displacement, shifting discourse on the use of force. I don't know if Dr. Önder Bakırcıoğlu is with us.
Yes, I'm with you. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Okay. Dr. Bakırcıoğlu, the floor is yours. Please proceed with your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all those involved to organize this event, in particular to Dr. Hidayet Sıddıkoğlu. So I will just briefly look at the role of international law in the protection of IDPs and try to cover potential solutions in terms of addressing the root causes and what the international community in general can do to alleviate the plight of IDPs. So in this presentation, I will focus on conflict-induced IDPs who remain obviously within their countries of origin, yet who have been forced to leave their homes to avoid the violent effects of armed conflicts. And today, many of the, as you know, internally displaced persons remain in protracted armed conflicts. And those who are able to return obviously continue to struggle to rebuild their lives. Unfortunately, international law has thus far done a poor job in preventing conflict-related displacement and punishing those responsible for arbitrary displacement. And impunity in that sense prevails in too many countries affected by internal displacement. Oftentimes, IDPs are fearful of violence, exploitation, discrimination, due to their political affiliation, ethnicity, religion, or other background. So what is the protection at the international level? Unlike the case of refugees, there is no international treaty which applies specifically to IDPs. And the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, doesn't have a general or exclusive mandate for internal displaced people. So the guiding principles document constitutes the main legal framework for the protection of IDPs. Some key aspects of the document include the following principles. So we have got non-discrimination, and this is about equality on legal entitlements with other fellow citizens. We also have got non-arbitrary displacement principle, which means no displacement can be made based on ethnic, racial or religious grounds. It is important to stress that the main responsibility to protect all the IDPs primarily rests on national authorities. So we have got national authorities who basically have the key responsibility. But national authorities should also accept the assistance of the international community in theory, where they don't have the capacity to provide assistance and protection to IDPs. As you know, unfortunately, the guiding principles document is not a legally binding document. But there is a significant catch here. The principles combine and reflect the binding provisions of international humanitarian law, international human rights law, international criminal law, and refugee law. So in a way, the principles is a synthesis of these binding documents. So it's like a melange, it's like a combination of binding principles in a non-binding legal document. So the principles seek to ensure that individuals are protected from unlawful deportations, and if they are deported or transferred because of military necessity, which constitutes a legitimate ground, in that case, they are provided with civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, among other rights, obviously. Today, this document is a global point of reference. In this context, the UN General Assembly recognizes the principles as an important legal framework, and encourages all states to adapt them at the domestic level, so to make them binding at the domestic level. The document, of course, is not sufficient because we need a stronger international regime. However, at the UN level, a binding universal document today doesn't look, unfortunately, promising. So therefore, it makes sense to build consensus from bottom up in order to better protect IDPs. So we need bottom-up approaches. In other words, it might be more productive to start working from the domestic level, and states in the sense should incorporate the guiding principles within their local legal systems and apply the principles in a rigorous manner. So we also have got some regional mechanisms. Sometimes strong regional organizations take the lead. For instance, in Africa, where the issue of conflict-induced IDPs is significant, some important steps have been taken. We have the 2006, in the Great Lakes region, which comprises a group of 11 states that adopted a protocol on the protection and assistance of IDPs. So the Great Lakes IDP protocol entered into force in 2008 among these 11 member states. And Article 6 of the protocol is quite significant here because it obliges states parties, again, to adopt and implement the guiding principles as a regional framework for providing assistance to IDPs, and also enact national legislation to domesticate the principles. So the protocol, in a way, encourages states to turn the soft law, the non-binding law obligations, into hard law, namely into binding law. We also have the Kampala Convention, also known as the African Union Convention for the Protection and Assistance of Internally Displaced Persons in Africa. This convention significantly is the world's first regional instrument that legally binds governments to provide protection for IDPs. In brief, the Kampala Convention reaffirms again that national authorities should take these key steps. First, create durable solutions to displacement, address the root causes of internal displacement, and obviously adopt national legislation to protect and assist the IDPs. Thus far, 30 out of 54 African states ratified the convention, so 30 states. So building on these initiatives, the regional initiatives, etc., there might be a UN convention one day, but there are currently very significant barriers for states to cooperate and adopt such a convention. So let us examine alternative ways to address the problem of displacement. Indeed, what are the proactive strategies we can adopt to address the IDP problem? Although addressing internal displacement, as I said, is the primary responsibility of governments, the international community also should help states with limited capacity to prevent and respond to displacement. And this takes place on a limited level. It does take place, but not at a sufficient level. There should be support, more support to implement comprehensive policies and laws regarding internal displacement. And there should be more economic aids to assist countries as regards long-term construction and development efforts. At the same time, while humanitarian agencies can be particularly helpful in providing urgent humanitarian assistance, the international community should focus really on strengthening the resilience of communities at risk of displacement. And obviously creating mechanisms of punitive accountability is another key element. So arbitrary displacement constitutes a very serious violation of international law in general, and the guiding principles and the binding international norms, they reflect in particular. In its most egregious forms, arbitrary displacement may amount to war crimes or crime against humanity, which are at the top of the hierarchy of international crimes, as you know. So one way of discouraging arbitrary displacement is therefore to take initiatives to end impunity prevailing in many displacement situations, and ensuring that victims obviously receive appropriate reparations, adequate compensation, safe return, and so on. So I would like to devote the rest of my presentation to the use of force discourse against terrorism, international terrorism. So one of the most significant source for internal displacement is the response of major superpowers to the notion of international terrorism. This matter requires our specific attention because military solutions are not helpful. Indeed, since President George W. Bush announced a global war on terror in the aftermath of 9/11, the US military has engaged in armed conflict around the world, along with some of the states, but the US military has been the dominant player. And this caused mass population displacement. Indeed, as our distinguished colleague, Professor Tehrani quoted, citing the report from Brown University's Cost of War project, as of September 2020, at least 37 million people have been displaced. And since 2001, there have been more than 5 million in Afghanistan, 3.7 in Pakistan, 9.2 in Iraq, 1.2 in Libya, 7.1 in Syria since 2014. These numbers are huge. And it is often stressed that ever since World War II, none of the conflicts produced such numbers. And the experts like Professor Tehrani claim that 37 million is quite conservative, in that the real number might range from 47 million to 59 million. Of course, it is notoriously difficult to measure the real scale of displacement, since the data collection, as it was often stressed in conflict zones and refugee camps, waged by the US, is not the only source, the only cause for such displacement. However, what is clear is that the so-called war on terror has thus far done nothing tangible to resolve the root causes of conflicts. The root causes of displacement can be attributed to such other factors as traditional fault lines along sectarian or tribal divides, poverty, prior conflicts, prior wars, large-scale political, economic, or social factors, or other types of geopolitical issues. So we have got numerous factors as well. But I'm particularly interested now about the legality of force against terrorism in international law now. So what to do regarding terrorism? We know that the US remains the world's strongest and most active military power. And ever since the end of Cold War, successive US administrations have often used US military force against most perceived threats. Unfortunately, this frenetic, this crazy pace of military activity has seldom produced positive outcomes. But the global war on terrorism, unfortunately, continues with no end in sight. So what is more, these days, superpowers also use drones as a low-cost way to fight potential threats, because they're not losing their troops, they do not elicit the ire or the anger of the local populace, so they're increasingly are reliant upon the use of drones. And all these types of use of force are using the same rationale, the same logic of preventive warfare. In other words, using force against a suspected and potential threat. So not material or real, but against a suspected and potential threat, which might or might not materialize at an undefined point in the future. So we do not have a specific spatial or temporal definition of the threat. And legally speaking, this doesn't qualify as self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, because Article 51 requires a material or imminent threat of harm for a state to engage in self-defensive force. And such a force must be proportionate to the real or imminently anticipated threat. And that force should be absolutely necessary, that there should be no way to avoid conflict. And in that sense, force can only be used as a measure of last resort when all other peaceful alternatives have been exhausted and it is clear that no friendly settlement of disputes is possible. And what is more, in order for you to use self-defensive force, the Security Council, which normally has monopoly on the use of force in international relations, should not be able to step in the situation to contain it. So the Security Council should not be in a situation to use force to stop the aggressor. Because as we know, the Council as a forced monopoly in international relations. But these days, its function, the Security Council function, is reduced almost to ineffectiveness as the big power cooperation doesn't work, because we have got the veto holding powers, including, the UK, Russia, US, China, France, and they often, especially Russia and US, kind of block council decisions. Also states, especially like Russia and the United States, don't want to be stopped by the Security Council. So, for instance, despite the Council's resistance to sanction the war, the US launched an unlawful war against Iraq in 2003, which created many refugees and IDPs, and the conflicts in Afghanistan or other regions are continuing, as I said, with no end in sight. And another important component of self-defense is that unilateral force can only be used against armed attacks. So it means the attack that the defending state faces is significant, is really serious. According to the International Court of Justice, in its Nicaragua decision in 1986, and this judgment is confirmed in the Wall case and Congo cases in early 2000, an armed attack which defensive action can be invoked must be a serious attack. However, today the US uses drone attacks against single individuals who cannot properly be identified as combatants or civilians. So they have no way of confirming the nature of the threat, and individuals are not in a position to mount such a scale which qualifies as armed attack, as though it's coming from a state proper. And there is no transparency or accountability for drone attacks. Oftentimes, the CIA operates these drones, and CIA, as you know, doesn't have combatant immunity. It's a civilian agency, which means the CIA operatives are not entitled to use force. It makes them war criminals if they do so, because it's a civilian agency. Its function is merely gathering intelligence. So what is the way forward? Although defense industry has generously profited from American wars, the civilians all over the conflict zones have not done well. And protracted wars are not making anyone freer, safer, or more prosperous. The international community must emphasize multilateral collaboration rather than unilateral action. And it should use force only as a measure of last resort when all peaceful alternatives, all viable peaceful alternatives have failed to produce results. The international community should therefore honor its treaty commitments and encourage more international, especially big power cooperation. It must adhere to respected norms, such as the prohibition on force, unless it is a clear-cut case of self-defense or unless it is authorized by the Security Council. So the international community should work to strengthen rather than undermining international institutions and human rights. And it should really end impunity and punish grave offenders. It should encourage peace-building efforts by creating, obviously, at the long run, strong democratic traditions at domestic levels so that protracted violence and its conditions can be addressed more properly. And states really should cease to define the size of their defense budget as the ultimate measure of their national security. Obviously, terrorism or other security threats will always pose a nagging problem, yet none of the actual threats will yield to a military solution alone. So military solutions are not sufficient at all. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your patience. Obviously, I will take questions, especially relating to international law, later on if you so wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amir Bakracoglu, for your insightful talk on legal perspective of refugees. You're very right, given that state must be powerful, particularly in terms of dealing with IDPs. Give an example of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is party to every covenant and every international conventions on refugees and including guiding principles of IDPs, internally displaced people. However, given ongoing conflict, political instability, the state is unable to meet the challenges of IDPs in the country. Now, I would like to, without wasting further time, I would like to request Dr. Shubhro from the University of Maharashtra National Law University in Nagpur, India, if he's ready to give us his presentation on the policies and practices of refugee protection from Indian perspective. Professor Shuvro, the floor is yours if you're ready to give us the presentation.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is Shuvro Sarkar. I'm from India. So the topic I'm going to speak is somehow different from what the previous speakers they talked about. And I am talking about from the perspective of one particular country, which is having a history of protecting people for a long period of time, on a long and a large amount of people they are protecting for a longer period of time. But even today, even as a party to various international human rights law instruments, it is not even a party to the 1951 convention, but there are certain practices and policies that has been developed considering the political interest, considering the geopolitical situation. So this is what I am going to talk about. So I am now sharing the screen. I hope it is visible to all of you. So where from I'm starting.
Yes, we can see your slides.
Yes. So firstly, I just want to start that India got its independence in 1947 from the British, but yes, the very independence that has resulted into a flow of millions of people across the borders of India and Pakistan. So that was the beginning. Before the drafting of the 1951 convention, India faced this much larger amount of people, those who came from Pakistan to India and shifted from India to Pakistan. So there was a situation in the beginning that Indian state tried to provide I'll say reception conditions to these refugees who initially came in the year 1947 till 1950s. We can briefly say that till 1950s. So initially it was very energetic in providing the protection requirements, protection needs of the people, but thereafter we see a gradual change in the policy, so that generousness in the early years, starting from 47 to early 1950s, so that started changing through the passage of time. So as I already told you, India is not a signatory to the 51 convention and the 67 protocol, so there is no such per se international law obligation on India to protect refugees except the customary norms of international law and as party to several other international instruments like Child Rights Convention or CEDAW. So what is happening here is there are certain national laws. So entry, stay, and departure of foreigners, these are regulated by these national laws. And when we have these national laws in place, the major problem is that these national laws, they do not distinguish between a refugee and a foreigner who are coming to India for any other various purposes. He may be coming for medical treatment, he may be coming for education or any other purpose, maybe a visitor only. But these laws, they do not distinguish between the individuals who are persecuted refugees, so who request protection. So in this backdrop, I can say at present, India is hosting around people from 35 different nationalities. So it is quite a large number. But yes, again, there is the problem of counting, because I'll say the UNHCR population database, which is there, it is not per se focuses the whole range of migration that happened to India, because there is an uncounted number of people who came from Bangladesh and who came from Pakistan. So these are not under the mandate of UNHCR. So there is a problem even in the number of refugees in the count. With reference to the laws which deals with the refugees in India, these are with the foreigners. These are the passports. See the timing, the year of enactment of this legislation. So Passport Entry into India Act 1920, Passport Entry into India Rules 1950, Registration of Foreigners Act 1939 and Foreigners Act 1946. So the problem is that all of these are pre-constitutional legislation. So all these pre-constitutional legislation, when you take into consideration, these were not able to cope up with the international human rights law standard that should be providing protection to vulnerable persons who are fleeing or who are fleeing any other type of persecution. So there is a gap in these laws, and mostly the most celebrated rights under the Refugee Convention, that means Article 33, which talks about the principle of non-refoulement, and Article 31, that means no prosecution for illegal entry. So these two articles, those are disrespected with the force from these laws. So this is the internal laws that deals with foreigners who are residing, who are entering into India, their stay and their departure. With reference to international obligations, yes, India is a signatory to, a state party to ICCPR, ICSCR, Child Rights Convention, CEDAW. So there are this body of international law where India is a state party. But even in terms of certain particular articles, they in the government, they have made reservations to that effect, so that the national legislations with reference to entry, stay and departure of foreigners that won't get disturbed because of the international obligations. And even when we celebratedly say about UDHR, but the UDHR article that talks about right of asylum, there is no such question of any obligation on the state to provide asylum. And in the case of customary international law, the deception of customary international law to the Indian system is that it has developed through the jurisprudence of the Indian judiciary that if the customary international law is in conflict with any national law, so the national law will be prevailing in that case. So in that case, so the principle of non-refoulement and this Article 31 of the Refugee Convention, so those are having direct conflict with the national law. So these are also not applicable. So what is happening? What generally happens? So if you are a refugee entering into India, first, there is possibility that you will be get arrested under the Foreigners Act for your illegal entry, and thereafter you will be sending for prosecution, and the prosecution there you need to apply to the magistrate who is dealing with your case to give you an opportunity so that you can go to the UNHCR and ask for a refugee status and apply for a refugee status. So this is one part of the story. That means the refugees who are mandated under the UNHCR can do their status determination. But there are also people from Tibet, there are also people from Sri Lanka, and uncounted number of people from Bangladesh and Pakistan, those who are under the direct control and mandate of the government of India. So they are not allowed to apply to UNHCR for refugee status, and they need to apply independently to the Indian authorities, as there are certain rules that has been developed through. And through these rules, they are getting a residence permit. So if they are qualifying, but the status determination process that is followed for UNHCR, and the process that is followed for the other refugees by the government of India. So these two processes are totally different. So from this, I would come to the response of the judiciary. Yes, if we see the response of the judiciary, the trial courts, the trial courts, they are very much consistent, because trial court, they are regulated by the Criminal Procedure Code, and the trial court magistrates and judges, they do not have any other option to go beyond the statute. So they are very much within the ambit of the statute, and they have very little room to do anything, except in certain cases. There has been a celebrated case the magistrate ordered the Ministry of Home Affairs to look for a possibility to table a bill in the parliament so that there could be a discussion on refugee law. So this is the trend from the trial courts. Even now we look into the situation of high courts. There are cases on various issues. So various issues, and for example, I can tell you about this questions of compensation, settlement and compensation. So you have been given certain land and that has been taken away from you after certain years. So the cases like this, then the cases of relating to the opportunity to seek asylum, that you need to go, you had to go to the High Court saying that, yes, my lord, I'm a refugee, so give me a chance to apply for refugee status. So this was the second category. Third category, we see the question of Indian citizenship, acquiring Indian citizenship. And these are the three main areas where the cases in the High Court that have been dealt with. So the numbering, it would be numbering around 70 to 75 cases. So in the High Courts that dealt with the questions of refugees and their rights in the Indian land. Thereafter, if we move to the question, the Supreme Court, the role of the Supreme Court, there have been 5 major cases. So in these 5 major cases, the Supreme Court in one of these cases, the second case I'm referring to, the National Human Rights Commission versus State of Arunachal Pradesh. So here in this case, the National Human Rights Commission, they moved to the Supreme Court of India against the decision of the state of Arunachal, which is also a provincial government of India, against the provincial government National Human Rights Commission. They went to the court to establish the rights of the Chakma refugees who came from the earlier, the erstwhile East Pakistan, the Chittagong Hill Tracts district. Now Bangladesh is a separate country. So this is seen to be a landmark decision, National Human Rights Commission's case, with reference to the protection of these people, because the Supreme Court in this case, they said that the refugees, they have a right to apply for the citizenship. So the state of Arunachal Pradesh, in this case, they were not actually forwarding the applications of the refugees to apply for their citizenship, because it's a process that this provincial government need to forward with their reports. Report means reports, police verification reports and intelligence reports to the Central Ministry of Home Affairs, and thereafter the Home Affairs is going to decide further. But the state of Arunachal Pradesh has blocked the process. And still, even after the decision of the National Human Rights Commission, certain files, those were forwarded to the central government. But thereafter, again, once again, we see the next case, Committee for the Citizenship Rights of Chakmas of again instituted in 2010, and it was finally the judgment came in the year 2015. So 1996 case of National Human Rights Commission, the results we got, that was celebrated, that was seen to be groundbreaking for the rights of refugees in India, but the real implementation, that has not actually happened as we thought of. After, I can come to the questions of discussions in the parliament. Yes, in India, the parliament, in the vibrant parliamentary democracy, the questions with reference to refugees and their rights, those were discussed. Those were discussed in several times, in many occasions. I can just list it about till 2016. 106 times, and till 2000, and in the bicameral legislature. So in one of the upper house of the parliament, it was 106 times the questions of refugee matters were discussed, and then it was discussed in the lower house for about 91 times. So in one point, we can say that parliamentarians or the politicians, they have certain sort of misunderstanding with reference to international law, application of international law, and the question of lawmaking with reference to the protection of refugees. So the questions were sometimes confusing, and the answers that were given by the Ministry of Home Affairs, those were also sometimes confusing. So the questions were asked in several different sorts of matters, arrival of refugees numbers and other related problems. So arrival of refugees and numbers. So this is something is very problematic. As I said, the number is not known to anyone. Yes, if today one number is given to you, tomorrow another number will be given to someone else, some other agency. So this is a disparity in the finding the total number of people who are actually refugees in India. The questions of differential treatments in the process of rehabilitation and relief and any other various different sorts of assistance that needs to be given to the refugees. So there is a discrimination that is also found from the answer of the Ministry of Home Affairs from the parliamentary discussions, because if we see the reception conditions for the Tibetan refugees and the reception conditions for the Sri Lankan Tamil refugees and the reception conditions of the present day Rohingya people, so these are different, these are varied in terms of essential elements, and thus it is there is no case of rehabilitation, relief, and other assistance. So these are different kinds of discussions that happened, along with the discussions on citizenship rights of the refugees, and also the questions of the standard operating procedure, because now there is a standard operating procedure that is happening, that was in place since 2010, and through this standard operating procedure, the foreigners registration officer are having certain powers to extend the visa, long-term visa of the refugees who are already declared as refugees. So from this, I will go to the discussion of the regional initiatives that was taken. Yes, there were certain regional initiatives that are also taken apart from the National Human Rights Commission's approach to move the Supreme Court. But one group, eminent person group, that was formed in the early 1990s to look for a possibility that India and rather I say the South Asian countries, they could have a refugee legislation. So while discussing on this particular matter, conferences happened in several countries, including Dhaka, including New Delhi, including Islamabad, and even in Nepal. So these conferences, through these conferences, our regional consensus was has arrived, and the persons, the persons who are in charge of this eminent persons group, so they were actually able to formulate a model national refugee law for the refugees, and this law was presented to people from presented to the government of all the South Asian countries. Initially, it got a very good reception. I'll say reception from the government, because they accepted it. They started discussing on this model law, but thereafter it just vanished. It just vanished. So then the question of the visualization for a refugee law. So if we take the example of India only, there are 4 questions where in the questions of refugee legislation, formation of refugee legislation, that was discussed. So first is the 1997 draft of the Model National Refugee Law that I already talked about. So this Model National Refugee Law, this was actually replica, we can say. This is actually a replica of the, if we say the take the OAU convention in one side and the Cartagena Declaration in another side. So and if we consider the security concerns of India and the regional situation, and this was a kind of inspired from the OAU and the Cartagena. So this was the first. The second initiative, that was in 2015, private member bill that was placed in the parliament in 2015. Again, this bill, this 2015 bill, initially, as I have gone through, it is very much dependent on the Common European Asylum Systems Qualification Directive, Reception Conditions Directive, and the Asylum Procedures Directive. So it's mostly inspired by the 3 directives of the European Union. Thereafter, there has been another attempt to, it was also a private member's bill, but this particular bill, National Asylum Bill, this was mostly on the questions of the citizenship rights of refugees. So it was talked about the definition of refugee and the status determination process, but it is rather focused more on the question of the citizenship rights. So it's in some cases it just proposed that the question of citizenship, it should be completed, it should be done within the 5 years of stay of the refugees in the Indian territory. And the next bill that was Also, in the same year, that was also placed in the parliament, the Protection of Refugees and Asylum Seekers Bill 2015. So all these bills, if we take together, it carries the significance that, yes, parliamentarians from different political parties, they are coming to the consensus that law is required for the protection of refugees. So it cannot be that a situation without law and the policies which has been taken on a time-to-time basis that will be continuing, because sometimes we see arbitrariness that is visible, that is literally visible, and to protect India and the people. So this is something we can get from the parliamentarians. We got from the parliamentarians that they'd come to a consensus. But you need to understand that none of these bills, those were placed by the government. So these are private members' bill. Certain discussions happen, but as soon as the parliament of that time that resolved, so the bills they just vanished with along with the parliament, because new elections happened. So the new government came in. So any bill that was there pending for the last parliament, so that is not going to come and to be discussed in the next parliamentary session. So all these bills, those are not in place at the present moment. So from these situations, we need to understand why India was not a signatory to the 51 Convention. The India's initial problem was that the question of geographical and the temporal limits. Secondly, the problem was with reference to the question of mass influx situation, because 51 Convention, it does not talk about the mass influx situation. Thirdly, we can say the problem of international burden sharing. So there has been no principle which talked about the international burden sharing mechanism which is going to happen. So even we have seen afterwards that the Cartagena plus processes, that means Cartagena plus 10, Cartagena plus 20, Cartagena plus 30. So this has tried to develop even the initiatives of ALCO, Asian African Legal Consultative Organization. They tried to develop a formula for international burden sharing, but rather the government never came to a consensus that we should have to have a law specifically for these refugees. So this is a situation that India requires a law so that there is no such discrimination. So discrimination on the basis of race, religion, or caste, or any other criteria, those are there. So there is no such discrimination. So considering on these laws and taking the analogy from the bills those were placed in the parliament, so need to think of a law where we have to be cautious about the definition, because if we go by the laws, those were already placed in the parliament. Sometimes the definitions, it is just the definition of the 51 Convention. Sometimes the definition, it was inspired from the OAU and Cartagena. And thirdly, the bill which was mainly inspired by the very much on the qualifications directive, subsidiary protection, and the international protection, refugee protection. So in this kind of a situation, we need to come through a dialogue and to understand that in terms of finding a definition, is it better to the 51 criteria, or we should go beyond it? We should go beyond and include a definition of persecution, include the actors of persecution. So these are also something we need to have a proper consensus and idea. The questions of authorities, this is another issue, the status determination authority, because in each of these different 4 bills, the formation of the authority that has been seen in a different manner. So we need to come to, again, a consensus and a decision that what serves the best, because India is not a small country. It's a large country having its border with Pakistan, its border with China, its border with Nepal, its border with Bhutan, its border with Bangladesh, its border with Myanmar. So in such a situation, we also, and in India, refugees generally do not come by flight. So they are just crossing the borders. So this considering this general these assumptions and the notions, we need to also come to a consensus and discussion on the authorities. What sort of authorities should they be in the grassroots level, or it should be just a super authority type of commission or something like that. So there are much debate on this, but no consensus till now. And the process of status determination, again, it is related to the questions of the status determination, formation of the status determination authority. We also need to think of the questions of voluntary repatriation, because in today's world, it is the voluntary repatriation we can see sometimes, because in the case of Sri Lankan refugees, the Supreme Court of India had to come to the rescue of the refugees because there were questions on that of involuntary repatriation. So Supreme Court had to give a direction to make sure that every refugee has given their informed consent that they want to go back to Sri Lanka. So that sort of situation we should not continue once again. Then we need to have a proper understanding of the mass influx situation. What sort of different types of rights we are going to think of for a situation of mass influx, because it is unlikely, it is not very much relevant to the situation if we think about the normal status determination, individual centric status determination system. And also the questions of very important and major question on the citizenship and naturalization process, because I told you about this case already, National Human Rights Commission versus State of Arunachal Pradesh. So these refugees, they came to India, their first generation, they came to India in the year 1964, 1965. So since 1964 to 65, it is, I think 3 generations have passed, so they are not even got their citizenship. So the question on the naturalization process and the citizenship process. So that should be something we need to think about with greater detail, considering the human condition, humanitarian considerations with reference to the lives of refugees. Then also we need to think about the cooperation with UNHCR and other international agencies. So from this background, we have to develop a kind of a system that would be comprehensive, that would be human, and that would be taking into consideration the security perspective of the country. At the same time, it will also think about the humanitarian situation of the people in need. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shuru, for your excellent presentation on the refugees situations in India. Now it is the president of the Dunya University is with us from Switzerland, and we'd like to request him to give us his. He's the final in this in the line of the mentors, so give us his final remarks about the refugee and particularly about the student. Dr. Javed, if you could hear us.
Hello.
Can you hear Professor Javed?
Yes, very good afternoon, dear colleagues. Hello.
We can hear you. Please, floor is yours. Please proceed.
I just try to share my screen. I don't know why I cannot share. Can you see my screen?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, I don't know why. I think there's some technical issues. Can you see now?
No, unfortunately, no, we cannot.
Okay, no problem. I will do it without the screen. No problem. Okay. Very good afternoon, dear colleagues, scholars, professors, and honorable students. My topic is today about the role of ethical leaders for the immigrant. Of course, we will do a very brief analysis about the role of leader, and also we'll do analysis that the two different kind of immigrant. If we just go in a story, just study the story of immigrant, we will find immigrant they contribute a lot of things in different country. If we take the story of United States, Canada, European country, and Switzerland, country that I'm living here, we'll find they contribute a lot. But we have two kind of immigrant. The immigrant that we call in Canada, in Europe, they call selective immigrant, which is the case in Canada, for example. They selected more than 10,000 candidate immigrant every year, very selective immigrant for Canada in a lot of other countries. But we have other immigrations or immigrant that they are obliged because of situations, financial situations, security situations, and poverty, job, a lot of things. But this kind of refugee or immigrant, they have a lot of barrier. They have barrier in two countries: their original country, and also the welcome country, which I call first and second country. If we just take the barrier from the first country, when they leave the country, they have a lot of barrier to find a destination where they have to go. They don't know because of the situation of country. There's a big problem, a financial problem. They don't know where exactly they want to go because of situation. The second problem in the welcome country, which they have a lot of barrier of language barriers, culture barriers, jobs, thousands of problems. But in any case, they try to find the solutions and integrate in this second country, which I call welcome country. But when we just analyze in welcome country, if I take example of last immigration in Europe we have a lot of problems now. The European country, they have financial problems, economic problems, especially now with this coronavirus, they have a lot of problems. But how we can solve this problem to allow these people, to allow this talent to work in their country and develop their country, and from both sides we can benefit from the welcome country and also from origin country. If we just give analyze from 2001 until today in several countries like Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, a lot of other countries, we find that there's between 6,000 billions and 12,000 billions expense for war. This means the United States and also other part of the United States expense between $6,000 billion until to $12,000 billion just for war. But the question is, why we do this war? Why start the war? If we analyze all these leaders, which I call leader without ethical approach, and this all war cost a lot of money. But after this starting war, they analyzed it that they started this war without understanding why. It was a mistake. That means they killed thousands of the people. They expended billions of dollars. And after that, they try to start to explain that this war was a mistake. Like last time, the Prime Minister of the UK, they mentioned the war of Iraq, it was a mistake. The Libya was a mistake. And now in Afghanistan, if we see the United States, they came on the point of zero that was in 2001, which is the Taliban, they asked a negotiation. And this means we start negotiation with the Taliban. The question is why we started this or analyze it. If we want to just save the welcome country and also the origin country, we need only to expand this all money, the billions of dollars for investment in the security and this economic development and social development in this country. For example, 20 years war in Afghanistan, and we started negotiation with Taliban because they funded that. It's a stupid war without understanding why we do war. My proposal in this one, which I call action research, because there's a scientific research and this action research. What we do now in Geneva and Switzerland at Swiss IMAF University, we're trying to understand about this action research, about the methodology of what we call calorimetric methodology, which we analyze quantitative supporter, qualitative, and also financial support, element. How we can help these leaders in different countries to stop about war, to think about how we can work together. If we take an example of this Central Asia in Afghanistan, China, India, Pakistan, Iran, Russia is half population of the world. And in this area, we have a lot of problem of economics, politics issues. Why? It's not because they don't know. It's because of the leader. We don't have the leader to become together, to discuss together, and which this relation, this approach will be even out all these European countries and United States. This means there's no more immigrant, there's no more refugee, and this talent they will stay in the country, in the region, to think about how they can improve the relationship between economic issues, social issues, education. And if we just take an analysis of this issues in Afghanistan, we have this my origin country. Since 2010, all students that was graduated from Dunya University or from Swiss University, 90% of this students they left the country. They live in the United States, in Europe, in Canada. That means we'll lose our talent. But who will develop the country? But when they come back to the country, for example, in my case, we have a barrier in the country, in the origin country, that they call, we are not from the country, we are foreign. That means we have double issues. We have the issues at the welcome country, which will never take us like as real citizens. And we have the same problem in our own country that they take as consideration like foreign citizens. That means there's a double problem for this all diaspora and immigrant, that they are the talent of the country, how they can maybe improve all situation of economic position in the country. All these issues, all these problems, issues, financial issues, according to me, it's just because of the lack of the leader, which we don't have the leader with the vision for today and for tomorrow. That means they never learn from their mistake that they done in the past. They didn't have any vision for a current time, and this will impact the future. For them, the future is future, which is for an ethical leader is the future now. And what will happen now is that leadership of the world, don't have a leader to manage the world. United States think only about the GDP. China think only about the GDP. A European country, they think only about GDP. And nothing about these issues of humanity and also an integration of maybe even immigrant in both sides from their own country and also from in the welcome country. In conclusion, I'm trying to explain all of these immigrant issues that we have: language barriers, family separations, economic issues, and integration. All this is not there is depend of this immigrant. It's just because of the lack of the leader, that they don't have the vision for their own country and also for the planet. This means we need a real leader to manage the region, the country, and the world, which will avoid to massive immigration in this all country, which they are, and they cannot manage these issues. For example, Europe today, they are unable to manage these issues of immigrations because of this financial issues, especially now they have the problem. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Javed, for your very informative talk on leadership issues in terms of dealing with refugees and IDPs. Now, since we are running out of beyond our time schedule, I would like to move on question and answer session, given that we had previously designated about 30 minutes for Q&A, but now given the time constraint, we'll have 10 minutes of Q&A. So I would like to open the floor for questions. If anyone has any questions for our key presenters about topics that we have discussed. Yes, yes, please. I think can you hear the questions, professors?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Good afternoon to all. And my name is Shukla Hydri. I'm the 5th semester of the BBA. My question is that I am hearing all the topics regarding the migrants and IDPs. So what will be the solution and what will be happening to them? That there are peoples who are living in migrants in other countries, in third countries and the second countries. So what will happen to them and what will be the solution for them? What will be their hope for their futures, that we are earning that they will be coming back to their countries? So what is the solution and what will be their futures going to happen to them? This is all the concerns that I'm also being as a person that it's my concern that they are spending their time, they are spending their money and they are taking risks and they are going to the other countries, but there is no solution and there is no hope for them. Thank you very much.
Okay. We will first of all we will take the questions and then I will let the professor and presenters to answer. Please, first of all, introduce yourself, tell your name and your position, and then briefly your question, please.
Good evening to everyone. My question, I am Abdurrahim Saidi, the CEO and acting for Dunya University. My question is to Professor Ali Zafar. As you have presented very well about the status of refugee in Turkey, I know that also there is a lot of Afghans there, and you were pointing out in your presentation that a considerable number of Syrians, they have got citizenship as well. So can you please tell us or throw some light that whether Turkey government, they have the policy to give citizenship to Afghans as well, or they will still continue as a refugee or with this temporary settlement? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question? It can be in Persian also. I can translate it into English if there's any in Persian or in Pashto. All right, we can go with maybe Dr. Ali Zafar first because you had the question directly. Can you hear us, Dr. Ali Zafar Saror? Or maybe we can go with the first question, then what will be the solution for refugees? Anybody from the presenters, they can, if anybody is interested to answer the question. How do you see the solution for ongoing problems for refugees who risk their life and give their money and to refuge to other country? Yes, please.
Hello?
Yes, please proceed.
It's concerning me, the question.
We can hear you. The question is, what is the solution? Because we all talk about the problems.
The solution is,
yeah, please.
The solution is very easy. I will explain you why. What's the solution? The first solution is we need a leader in the country. For example, why we don't have immigrants from Switzerland to Germany, and why we don't have immigrants from Germany to United States? Why we don't have immigrants from Paris to from France in Afghanistan? Because they think, the leader think about the country, the society, not about their own interest. In Afghanistan, if I take the case of Afghanistan and also this all in developing country, their one objective to keep the power without the society and the country. And they become, which I call in English, leader by accident. Because what's the meaning of leader by accident? The leader by accident is, this means there's no vision, there's no mission, there's no action. For example, if we don't have any stability in Afghanistan, which is the main responsible is the president and all this stakeholder of leadership of the government. If they cannot bring the sustainability, the economic sustainability, security sustainability, and if they are not able to work with the neighbor, it's impossible to bring peace in Afghanistan. If we don't have any peace, we will leave the country. If you take the statistic of Afghanistan, all immigrants, they're not poor people. They're not people without any education. The majority of them, they have very good background of that education. They have some financially, they have a very good situation, and they left the country because they are very safe in the country. There's no protection. There's no security. First point, we need internally sustainability in the country. The second thing, there's a lot of other immigrants that we call selective immigrant, which is my case. For example, when I left my country, I came in Switzerland for a study. And I tried to integrate here without to pass by illegal immigration. I came here and I studied and I asked some request from the government. I got my all permit that I am living here. I try to help my country and other immigration by this way, no problem. There's a lot of Indian countries to do that. There's a lot of African to do that. But the case of Afghanistan, 99% of the immigration is doing illegal immigration. It's not by legal. That's when you request their demand, you ask, you go to the country. If we have stability in the country, the problem is solved. If we don't have, you will see this problem will continue. But for one more, the other hand, say the external country, they're involved in our country. If they will stop this war, which without any definition, why did war in our country? Because we don't know why we kill each other in Afghanistan. We kill each other for the interest of other country. In this case, there's no immigration. This means internal problem, external problem. All this thing depend on leader. If there's no leader, there's no vision. No vision, no action. No action, there's no mission.
Thank you very much, Professor. If anyone else, Professor Trani or Dr. Ander Bakarjolo or Professor Shuvrok, would like to give your comments on the question, the rights for the refugees. Yes, please, Dr.
Yeah, just very briefly, as I kind of underlined in my interpretation, I mean, it's a complex problem. As our colleagues stated, that one key element is leadership. Another is creating the culture of democracy. Another is creating a culture of punishing offenders, taking measures at the domestic level. Another key component is international cooperation. Perhaps another thing is to address the root causes of conflict. So why do conflicts emerge? What can we do to, dissuade people from getting involved in conflicts? Maybe providing them with more human rights to express themselves. Maybe providing them more economic incentives. Maybe providing them more democracy to conflicts, and creating strengthening the equality discourse, enabling states to become part of this international dialogue by encouraging them to be signatories to international conventions and actually treating them as equals. Sustainable economic development programs. And finding really solutions to the problem of refugees and IDPs at a global level, because we have got this ripple effect. So if one country produces refugees or IDPs that are potentially problematic people for host countries, for other countries, it may have spillover effects, and they're vulnerable to recruitment for radical organizations, etc. So it's not a single one country type solution. It is a global solution. Countries should cooperate more systemically to strengthen domestic and international institutions. Just my 2 cents to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to put some?
Yeah, maybe I can contribute to the first question and directly the second question related with me.
Go ahead.
It is quite classical, maybe, but basic suggestion for such a crisis by offering the global solution. However, the recent developments makes us quite pessimistic about such a management in the global range. Although we should keep our belief, our faith in the global governance about such a crisis, I would like to suggest to think about the regional solution as well. The European Union is a quite significant example for us, although they have been claiming their suggestions as the universal. Actually, these protection mechanisms in Europe emerge from their own civilization and their own region or culture. So every part of the world, in India, in Middle East, or in South America, besides this global perspective, we need to develop our regional protection mechanisms as well. Dawn Chetty from Oxford University is also quite insistent about this suggestion as well. So I believe that, for example, we have a problem with Syrian. We are deeply affected by the crisis in the Syria and Afghanistan. However, I don't believe that unless we couldn't find a solution with Syrian government or Afghanistan government, we couldn't solve these problems as well. Of course, the other actors in the global range must support this kind of efforts as well. To the second question, thank you for the question, for the owner of the question. First of all, we have no clear data about the citizenship in Turkey. Actually, we don't know how many Afghan or other origin citizenship acquired people are available in Turkey now, unfortunately. However, we have some numbers about the Syrians, which we learned from the newspaper, unfortunately. The second nexus about this different status of the Syrian refugees and Afghan people in Turkey. Although we call them as the refugee, officially Turkey is not giving to refugee status to the Syrians or Afghans. As you may know about that, the Turkey as the conditional signatory of the Geneva Convention, they gave just 24 or 23 person refugee status, which is framework in the Geneva Convention. So they have some different statute for the different displaced people. For example, Syrians are under the temporary protection because that they came to the door of the border by influx and in the emergent situation. On the other hand, the other origin displaced people like Afghans or Pakistanis are accepted as under the international protection, which is applied by individually. So the citizenship requirement is quite different for the normal people. I mean, with a certain sort of investment can enough to apply to the citizenship in Turkey. I'm sure that there are some Afghans in Turkey who are following this way. However, if you are asking about the international protection holder, I have no information about that. They can apply to the citizenship before a certain years, maybe 5 or 10 years, I don't know. But there is no clear procedure about the citizenship requirement for the Afghans. But we know that the most deportation numbers also belongs to the Afghans. Last year, as we know, 40,000 irregular migrants from Afghanistan were deported to Afghanistan back. So the procedure for the Afghans is a bit much more complex than the Syrians. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the answer. Now, because we have few students joining us from Kazakhstan, do you have a question? And before going to that question, then I would like to also give about 5 minutes for students joining us from India and Kazakhstan, if they have also any questions, so they can raise their questions. And before going to that, we have one more question here in the floor, and then we will give the opportunity for students who are joining us from Kazakhstan and from India. Yes, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I have one question from Churvo Sarkar. I know many of the refugees live more than 5 years in India. How many of them got citizenship? And also, is there any facility that Indian government provide free facilities for refugees, for example, in education, in health, or much more? Yes, thank you.
Can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Saif Rahman Hashimi. I'm the teacher of economic faculty in Indian University.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Shubro, we have your answer, and then we go to the, we give opportunity for the students from Kazakhstan and India.
Yes, I hope I'm audible. So thank you very much for the question. So first thing you asked is how many refugees they got the citizenship. So, and you said a term of 5 years. So I need to make it clear that 5 years is not the time I mentioned about applying for Indian citizenship. It was proposed in one of the bills that 5 years is a time that should be given for the application that you can do for registering as a citizen of India. So what the Indian Citizenship Act says, Indian Citizenship Act says in case of registration, if you want to be a citizen of India by registration, you need to apply after 7 years of stay. And in the case of naturalization, you need to apply after 14 years of stay. So these are the two things. So it is difficult that there would be the data which will be available to the Ministry of Home Affairs that was released anywhere or that is in the public domain to tell you any number that this much of people, they were given the citizenship from different countries. But yes, sometimes we get to know about people, mainly those who are UNHCR mandated refugees, because it's there flashed in the UNHCR's website that some Afghan refugees, some refugees from some neighboring countries, they received their citizenship, but that mostly after 14 years of stay. That means the case of naturalization, because the question of registration comes only when you are married to an Indian citizen or you are a person of Indian origin. And in the person of Indian origin is someone who is considered who is a resident of the British India. So his forefathers or her forefathers, those were the resident of British India. So the old Indian subcontinent. So this is the situation of the law. And in terms of number, it is nowhere reflected that how many of the people they have received Indian citizenship as refugees. Secondly, the second part of your question with reference to the facilities that was provided. Yes, the facilities, those were provided. If I talk about one particular refugee group, for example, the Tibetans. So the Tibetans, when they arrived in 1959 with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, So what seen the rest of the government was so responsive. So it was a responsible response. And when we seen the response, there were central government schools were formed for the education of Tibetan children. They have been given, even there is a policy, Tibetan rehabilitation policy. And under this policy, the Tibetan refugees, they can get lands in India and lands on lease, and law of lease in India is almost like the British law of lease, and they can stay there with the permission of the government, and these are renewable leases. And with reference to education, as I told you already, there has been an establishment called Central Tibetan Schools. So separate schools were also formed for these Tibetan refugees. But now come to the question of Sri Lankans. When Sri Lankans arrive in a large number in the Indian southern state of Tamil Nadu, so what we have seen there, it was initially they were camped it's almost like a detention center, and certain facilities were provided. Yes, cash doles were provided, also some food items and non-food items, those were also provided. But in terms of education, they were mostly educated in the government schools. They have got the opportunity to study in the government schools. And also in the case of treatment, health, so they were allowed to go to the government hospitals. And it is in India, if you want to take a treatment in a government hospital, you need to pay 2 rupees. So 2 rupees, you buy a ticket and you can go and you can go and see the doctor, but the medicines you need to buy yourself. So that facilities was available to the Sri Lankans. Thereafter, and you need to understand the problem in India is that the questions of health, education, and certain other matters, those are mostly regulated by the states, provincial governments. So it does not come under the power of the central government. So various state governments, that means the provincial governments, they have their own policies with reference to education, with reference to health, and similar other issues. So in the case of Delhi, where mostly the Afghan refugees are staying there, they have this facility of getting their children admitted into government school, provided that they are registered refugees under UNHCR. They have the valid residential permit from the foreigners registration officer, and also they must have that UNHCR ID card and the foreigners registration officer, so they can get their children admitted into the government school. And also for the hospitals, yes, they can go and produce their card, and they can get the treatment without spending a single rupee. So that was the facility given by the government of Delhi, and it is restricted only to the government in the Delhi region. So that is the situation. So what I want to end here is by saying that it is not equal for everyone in everywhere. So it is different. It is different for different people, and there is the major problem.
Thank you very much for your answer. Is there any question from students from Kazakhstan and India? If they can ask if there's any question. All right, then, if there's no question, thank you very much for all of, all right, we have one more question, and this is the last question. All right.
Thank you so much. First of all, thanks to all. Thank you especially for the groups who has a good presentation. Actually, to express, I have a big question actually to ask you, many questions to ask all, but specifically, I want to ask you, Mr. Tarney, what was the main reason for selecting 3 provinces for accomplishment of the research, while we have many problems in other provinces like Helmand and many other Afghanistan provinces? The next question is from Mr. Sair Olo. Yeah, if I pronounce his name correctly. As you mentioned, there are a lots of barriers with asylums, especially for the refugees in Turkey. Is there any specific policies or procedure to remove the barriers, or
discriminations? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your question. Professor Trani, we go first with you. The question is why we choose the 3 provinces, not other provinces that they have very serious problems of IDPs and refugees like Helmand. Yes, Professor Trani.
Yeah, you could respond yourself, right?
Yeah.
We chose these provinces because, first of all, it's a pilot study, so we really hope to expand to other settlements of internally displaced persons in other provinces. But these are particularly representative of the large settlements of internally displaced persons in Afghanistan, particularly near the 3 urban centers of Kabul, Herat, and Jalalabad. But I totally agree with you. We would need to investigate displacement in other provinces. Although I'm not sure Helmand itself has a lot of IDPs. There are people leaving Helmand to go to other provinces where the fighting and the conflict is less prevalent. But around Kandahar, definitely, and other urban centers, Mazar-i Sharif, Kunduz, etc., there are settlements, and we definitely would like to expand our study to those. Thank you for your question. Excellent question.
Yes, Professor Farrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, about the discrimination, what can the government or the other actors are doing in Turkey? In 2014, law on foreign and international protection is issued, and it is quite a crucial turning point regarding to the international protection in Turkey. And also similarly in 2016, a law on the labor force, international labor force is published, and this is also a quite important step to take the guarantee of the rights of the migrant workers in the labor force. So, however, it is quite new, and the culture in the bureaucracy and among the people are still new in Turkey. So there are many problems in the implementation. However, improving of this culture and the working conditions needs to time and needs to other related regulations to publish. And also the other major conflicts or problems in Turkey also make a barrier about to focusing on this kind of refugees and foreigners problems in Turkey as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Very sorry for your running out of time, but a very simple question. Please introduce yourself and then ask.
My name is Muhammad Naim Poya. I'm lecturer of political department at the New University. Just I have a simple question from, first of all, I want to thank from all presenters. Very good talks about these refugees. I have a simple question from presenters from India. I know many refugees in India, a lot of refugees in India, but unfortunately the government of India has not given any citizenship for those refugees, especially for Muslim refugees. My question is that why the government of India has passed such kind of law to protect for the Muslim citizenship in India. The second question from presenter from UK, I don't know the name. What is the main procedure from the international law to protect the refugee, those who are living in Turkey, Greece, and any other European country? They are very, very factor of this discrimination in this country. I don't know what is the main mechanism or procedure to practice refugee in these countries. Thank you.
Well, indeed, it wasn't very simple. There are very huge, big questions. Yes, please. We start with the Dr. Shubro first, and then Professor Önder Bakırcıoğlu the second. Please.
Yes, thank you for the question. Dr. Siddiqui, he has pointed out this is not that easy question or simple question. See, the question of citizenship, you are very specific about asking about the question of citizenship for Muslim refugees. But before going to answer these specific questions, I need to give some backdrop from the constitutional mechanism, because India as a country, it has a constitution that was there since 1949. There have been several amendments to the constitution, but this constitution mainly focuses, it has its inspiration from the Government of India Act, which was passed in the British legislature in the year 1947. And before that, there was the Government of India Act in 1935. So those were the main inspirations for India to have this constitution. And in the Constituent Assembly debates, there were discussions, there were representatives from all communities, all different castes, and all religions. So the comprehensiveness of the Constitution of India, it is a socialist, secular, and democratic republic. Socialist, secular, and democratic liberty. But I do not know where these socialist principles are. But secular and democratic republic, that we can understand. But yes, present day context, people might question where is the question of secularism involved in the present day India. So that political aspect I am not going into. But per se, India is a country which is secular in terms of its constitutional mandate. So there cannot be any provision in any law which favors certain particular religion and which disfavors certain particular religion. So that is one answer from the constitutional perspective. Secondly, with reference to the question of citizenship of Muslim refugees. So as this question, you need to understand the citizenship in India, it is regulated by the Citizenship Act of 1955. And this Citizenship Act, as I told you, there are two opportunities for a foreigner to acquire Indian citizenship. Because you are not someone who were born in India, so you do not have the chance to get the citizenship of India by birth or by descent, but what you can get is a citizenship by registration and by naturalization. So that process that has to be completed. That means the 7 years of stay and 7 years of legal stay with all documents. That means you need to have your refugee status determination card, and which is extended from year to year basis, or after 3 years it is extended in certain cases. You must have to have your residence permit for the last 7 years, so that where you were exactly, what was your address, so that has to be proved. So when all these things are done, only then you are eligible to apply. And after application, thereafter, the major problem comes thereafter, because there would be verification by the intelligence agencies. So there, the intelligence agencies, they will look from the perspective of the security of the country. They will look for various sorts of data, various sorts of information, for even if some people you don't know, but they will be getting information from those people about the conduct of yours in India for the last 6, 7, 8, or 9 years. So these are some procedures that needs to be followed to get the Indian citizenship. So rather, in this context, what I can tell you is that it is not that so easy to call for one particular community to get the citizenship. And you can ask me that, sir, in that context, how do you say that? There is an amendment that has happened to the Indian Parliament, that was happening in the Indian Parliament just few months back. It is called the Citizenship Amendment Act. So in that act, the Government of India, they allowed minority refugees, minority community refugees from Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan to apply for Indian citizenship only after 7 years of stay. So the time frame for naturalization of the minority community refugees from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh that was reduced. So you can ask me why this is. Yes, why this is, you need to understand in that case the question, the parliamentary democracy and how parliament works. So when some political party, they have their majority in both houses of the parliament, so they can come up and pass any bill. But the major issue that the major I'll say remedy we have is the judicial review. So it is Indian Supreme Court. It has shown great resistance in the matter of unbecoming laws that was passed in the parliament. So in this regard, this present subject matter of this Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 that was challenged by 200, I think, no, not 200, it is 168 petitions were directly filed to the Supreme Court of India. So in the initial phase, all these petitions were taken together, and the Supreme Court has given a particular date for hearing, and the hearings are going on. So it's a matter which is presently sub judice and under consideration and under judicial review. So we do not know whether this law, and it is most probably this law is not going to stand the test of constitutionality. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, so regarding the question posed, as Dr. Siddiqoğlu says, today we received really big questions, not really to exhaustively answer. It is impossible to touch upon every key element, but let's talk about refugees. So we have got two key categories, refugees and IDPs. Regarding refugees, we have got a stronger international protection, a binding treaty, namely the 1951 Geneva Convention for the Protection of Refugees. And a lot of the country, majority of the world, basically are signatories to this convention, and it incorporates really important principles like equality, non-discrimination, or the principle of non-refoulement, which means you cannot be really sent back to your country if you are likely to be persecuted on grounds of nationality, race, religion, or your political affiliation. And lately, sexual discrimination is kind of added to the list as well. And, you know, Refugee Convention incorporates many human rights principles as well. So at the IDP level, as I said, there is no international binding instrument. And we have got the guiding principles. The guiding principles, as I stated in my speech, incorporates the binding norms of international law, namely human rights law, international humanitarian law, international criminal law. They're all kind of incorporated in the guiding principles. But as I said, because there is no strong international cooperation today, it is unlikely that the international community will come up with a binding instrument. Therefore, we have got regional attempts. I talked about the Kampala Convention, which is a binding document at the African level. I talked about the regional Great Lake Protocol, and also we have got the European Union Protocol, all of which basically suggest that national authorities should implement these international principles, incorporate guiding principles, and make them binding at the national level so we can give them protection. So we have got these international efforts, which is not really strong, and we have got some regional efforts at the African level and European level. But at Europe, obviously, we don't have a huge problem because they have got less conflict. They have got a relatively stronger democratic tradition, especially in the aftermath of the Second World War. So you have got less problem of displacement there. And obviously for all categories of people, what is significant here is that IDPs are still citizens. They remain within the country of conflict. So they are entitled to every other right that normal citizens are entitled to. Obviously, they will face discrimination due to political problems, but the national authorities must treat them like nationals, so they don't have any problems with that, theoretically, obviously. And then refugees are not citizens, but they are protected by human rights, because each country, under international law, are obliged to extend the protection of human rights to every single person, regardless of citizenship status. So even if you are an illegal migrant, irregular migrant, it doesn't matter. You are treated as a person worthy of human dignity, right? So you have got the right to equality, you have got the right to access to justice, freedom from torture, right to liberty, and every other single human rights item listed in ICCPR or in ICSCR. So you are entitled to all these rights as well. Obviously, you have got international humanitarian law. Regardless of your citizenship, your status, you cannot be subjected to international war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and there are mechanisms under international law to punish the offenders. So you have got this civilian protection and prevention of every single potential war crime that can be committed against you. And obviously, you have got the international criminal law, which punishes offenders of grave offenses. Unfortunately, international criminal law hasn't been working perfectly because it doesn't have the backing of US, China, Saudi Arabia, and some influential key actors in international domain. But we saw that in Africa, especially, the Security Council initiated the mechanisms of ICC, and Omar al-Bashir is likely to face charges. Some will be critical about ICC because of its selective procedure and the fact that it cannot touch to strong international actors like George W. Bush or Tony Blair because of their initiation of an illegal war on Iraq. One cannot politically expect that ICC is going to be effective towards them. But theoretically, we have got all these instruments as well. And we have got the United Nations Charter, UNESCO, we have got the Convention on the Rights of Children, the Convention on the Rights of the Disabled, Convention against racial discrimination, Convention towards the protection of women, CEDAW. So we have got all these human rights instruments as well, which are geared towards protecting these individuals. But as I said, international laws success is not really tangible as of yet. But remember that we only have the development of international law and international human rights law, especially since the end of the Second World War. So it is still in its cradle, and there is still potential for it to develop. But unfortunately, political realities are there, which makes us wary and realistic of the limitations of all these mechanisms too. I hope I have answered your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your detailed answer, Professor Akujolo. Yes, we crossed a lot of our time, and thank you for all. Before going to that, about the international law, we are really all of us looking forward for the US elections to come up with results. If Trump is coming again, a lot of weight of international, we really don't know what will happen to the remaining international law, particularly humanitarian and refugee issues. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for all of you. I know it was, all of you had a very tight schedule, and it has been very long discussion with all of us, all of you separately since the middle of October. We postponed the symposium for several times. Again, on the behalf of University of Dunya, I personally thank you very much for giving your time and invaluable presentations on this very important symposium on refugees and IDPs. Particularly thanks, I don't know if Professor Tani hears us or not, he had to wake up in 4 a.m. in Washington time, so he was with us from very early time. So thank you very much. We end here. Yes, we will have series, and we will let you know. Hope to see you again in our next event. Thank you very much for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.